Welcome to the Go Higher Show, where we are dedicated to higher levels of leadership, purpose, and the power of transformation. We empower and equip leaders to rise, mindsets to transform, and legacies to evolve. Hosted by Mr. Hakim Erwin, author, leadership and public speaking coach, and the Transformational Influencer. Here on the Go Higher Show, we are dedicated to helping individuals transform your mindset, build character and emotional intelligence, develop executive presence, lead with integrity and influence, and prepare for greater assignments. Welcome again to the Go Higher Show. Let's go. I want you to think back to episode number 1, right around the 18-minute and 30-second mark, where I briefly mentioned the topic of servant leadership and how we were going to dedicate an entire episode to that topic. Well, here we are. We have arrived at the place where we are going to discuss in somewhat of a limited detail the model that flips the leadership pyramid upside down. The leadership model that exposes who truly stands with the people, prioritizing their welfare, as opposed to the ones who are always positioning themselves above and away from the people and prioritizing their own welfare. Today, we go higher by going lower into servant leadership. Now, this isn't soft leadership. This isn't passive leadership. This is leadership that requires strength, restraint, emotional intelligence, and a willingness to carry what others never see. Today, we're going to explore where this model came from, why it works, the precise definition and 8 core fundamental elements of that leadership model, why some leaders resist it, and how it aligns or contrasts with the leadership of Yeshua Hamashiach, otherwise known to many as Jesus Christ. Now, the model term servant leadership is credited to a Mr. Robert K. Greenleaf, who in 1970, that's 1970, wrote his groundbreaking essay, The Servant as Leader. And in it, Mr. Greenleaf challenged the traditional top-down model of leadership and made a radical observation. The greatest leaders aren't driven by power. They're driven by service. They don't start with authority. They start with responsibility. But here's what's important to understand. Greenleaf didn't invent the idea. He gave language to something that already existed. Because servant leadership is not modern. It's actually very ancient. It's cultural. It's spiritual. You see it in traditional African village systems where elders did not lead by title. They led by demonstrated care. Before they ever spoke into the community, they served it. They protected it. They sustained it. Leadership was not claimed. It was recognized. You see it in indigenous cultures all across the world, where leadership was never about domination, but about stewardship. The leader was the one who carried the weight of the people, not the one who stood above them. And you see it most clearly in Scripture, long before any leadership theory was ever written. In the life of Yeshua Hamashiach, known to many as Jesus Christ, we see the ultimate model of servant leadership. He didn't just teach it, he lived it. He healed, he listened, he washed the feet of those who followed him. And then he made this statement that flipped every human understanding of power. The greatest among you shall be your servant. The greatest among you shall be your servant. Now, that wasn't a suggestion. That was a standard. And if you think this model only lives in ancient texts, well, think again. Look at leaders like Nelson Mandela. Mandela spent 27 years in prison, not emerging with bitterness, but with a commitment to serve a nation that had oppressed him. And when he became president, he didn't lead with revenge. He led with reconciliation. He chose unity over ego, healing over power. Now that is servant leadership. And when we talk about servant leadership, we're not talking about a soft approach to leadership. We're talking about a disciplined, intentional, and often sacrificial choice to lead in a way that prioritizes people over position. See, servant leadership isn't new. It's rediscovered. It's restored. And in many ways, it's required. Now, let me also provide you with a more precise definition of servant leadership, as well as 8 core elements for future understanding and application. Servant leadership is a leadership philosophy and practice in which the primary goal of the leader is to serve by developing, empowering, and elevating others while stewarding influence to achieve meaningful and sustainable results. So again, servant leadership is a leadership philosophy and practice in which the primary goal of the leader is to serve by developing, empowering, and elevating others while stewarding influence to achieve meaningful and sustainable results. And in even more simpler terms, a servant leader leads by putting people first without losing sight of purpose, performance, or outcomes. A servant leader leads by putting people first without losing sight of purpose, performance, or outcomes. And this is where many people get it wrong, because servant leadership is not passive, it's not weak, it's not indecisive, and it's definitely not people-pleasing. It is strong, disciplined, and intentional leadership that says, I am responsible for the growth of the people, the health of the culture, and the results we produce. Now, here are the 8 core elements that further define servant leadership at its highest level. Number 1, service before status. Service before status. Servant leaders do not lead to be seen. They lead to serve a need. What this means is prioritizing impact over image, solving problems others avoid, and being willing to do what you ask others to do. So again, that is prioritizing impact over image, solving problems others avoid, and being willing to do what you ask others to do. A true leader asks, what do my people need to succeed? Number 2, empathy and deep listening. Empathy and deep listening. Servant leadership begins with understanding, not surface level listening, but intentional, active listening. Hearing concerns without defensiveness, understanding perspectives before responding, and creating psychological safety. Hearing concerns without defensiveness, understanding perspectives before responding, and creating psychological safety. This is what builds trust, not just compliance. Number 3, stewardship, not ownership. Stewardship, not ownership. Servant leaders see leadership as a trust, not a possession. You don't own the position. You are entrusted with people, resources, and influence. And your job is to manage all 3 responsibly: people, resources, and influence. Number 4 is development of others. Development of others. A servant leader measures success by who they are building, not just what they are building. This includes coaching and mentoring, creating growth opportunities, holding people accountable to their potential. Coaching and mentoring, creating growth opportunities, and holding people accountable to their potential. If people grow under your leadership, you're leading. If they shrink, you're managing, not leading. Number 5 is humility with confidence. Humility with confidence. This is a powerful tension. Servant leaders are humble enough to listen, learn, and admit mistakes, confident enough to make decisions and lead boldly. It's not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less often. Number 6, accountability and standards. Accountability and standards. Servant leadership is not soft. It requires clear expectations, consistent standards, and honest feedback. Clear expectations, consistent standards, and honest feedback. Because serving people includes not allowing them to stay beneath their capacity. Number 7, vision and purpose alignment. Vision and purpose alignment. Serving people does not mean drifting without direction. Servant leaders cast clear vision, align people to purpose, and connect daily work to a bigger mission. Cast clear vision, align people to purpose, and connect daily work to a bigger mission. People don't just want to be cared for. They want to be a part of something that matters. And number 8 is sacrifice and responsibility. Sacrifice and responsibility. At its core, servant leadership is costly. It requires taking responsibility when things go wrong, giving credit when things go right, and choosing long-term impact over short-term comfort. Taking responsibility when things go wrong, giving credit when things go right, and choosing long-term impact over short-term comfort. The servant leader carries the weight so others can grow into strength. Let me also provide you with an acronym to help you in your servant leadership transformation. And if you're already following this model, it can still be beneficial to you. The S.E.R.V.E framework. The acronym is the word S.E.R.V.E, S.E.R.V.E. So the S.E.R.V.E framework is this. S stands for serve first, people before position. The E stands for empathize deeply, listen and understand. Listen and understand. The R stands for raise others, develop and empower. Develop and empower. The V, as in Victor, stands for value responsibility. Steward influence well. Steward influence well. And the last E stands for execute with excellence. Drive results and standards. Drive results and standards. So again, that acronym is the S.E.R.V.E framework. The S for serve first, E, the first E, for empathize deeply, the R is for raise others, the V is for value responsibility, and the second E is for execute with excellence. Servant leadership works because it addresses the deepest human needs. People want to be seen, people want to be valued, people want to be developed, and people want to trust their leader. When a leader serves, engagement rises, loyalty strengthens, innovation increases, and toxicity decreases, and teams become communities. Servant leadership creates environments where people don't just work, they grow. And when people grow, organizations grow. This model works because it aligns with how humans are wired. Now, let's be 100% honest and upfront, because not every leader wants to serve. There's a resistance to servant leadership because of its effectiveness in exposing things that many would rather prefer remain hidden. It requires humility, and humility exposes ego. It requires accountability, and accountability exposes motives. It requires emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence exposes immaturity. It requires patience, and patience exposes insecurity. Some leaders fear that serving makes them look weak. Some fear being taken advantage of. Some simply just don't know how to lead without hierarchy. And for some, it's the fear of losing control, or rather the loss of control over others. Now, that's a big one. And I would even argue that that one could possibly be at the top of the list. So let me repeat that one. Some leaders fear the losing of control, or rather the loss of control over others. How many of you recognize that in some of your present leaders? But see, here's the truth. Servant leadership doesn't weaken authority. It legitimizes it. Servant leadership does not weaken authority. It legitimizes it. See, when a leader chooses to serve, several things happen. Trust becomes the culture, not the expectation, or not the exception, Trust becomes the culture, not the exception. People feel safe enough to bring their best ideas. Turnover drops because people stay where they feel valued. Conflict becomes healthier because the leader models emotional maturity. The leader gains influence that can't be bought or forced, only earned. Servant leadership produces leaders who are followed not out of fear, but out of respect. And that is sustainable leadership. Now, let's address the question. Is servant leadership modeled after Yeshua Hamashiach, or Jesus Christ? Mr. Greenleaf didn't claim that, but the parallels are undeniable. For Yeshua led with compassion. He corrected with clarity. He empowered others. He elevated the overlooked. He served before he spoke. He carried responsibility others couldn't see. And he demonstrated authority without arrogance. And here's the contrast. Yeshua didn't serve to gain influence. He served because it was his nature. Modern servant leadership is a strategy. Yeshua's servant leadership was an identity. And that's the challenge for us today. Are we serving because it works, or because it's who we are becoming? So let me give you some examples, just a couple of examples, where we see Yeshua exemplifying servant leadership in the scriptures. In the Gospel of John, chapter 13, 1-7, this is one of the most undeniable demonstrations of servant leadership. On the night before his crucifixion, knowing who he was, where he came from, and where he was going, Yeshua did something culturally shocking. He knelt down and he washed the feet of his disciples, including the one who would betray him. We all know him. And how many of us would actually wash the feet of a person that we knew was going to betray us? This wasn't symbolic for him. It was instructional. Leadership is not about position. It's about posture. He didn't just tell them how to lead. He showed them what leadership looks like when ego is removed. The next example is when he fed the 5,000. This is in Matthew chapter 14, verses 13 through 21. And when this crowd had followed him into a remote place, the disciples, or his disciples, saw a problem. There was no food, so let's send them away. But Yeshua, or Jesus, saw responsibility. He didn't dismiss the need. He met the need. He took what was available, or he took what was available. He blessed it. He multiplied it, and thousands were fed because of that. This is servant leadership in action. He recognized the need. He accepted responsibility. He empowered his disciples to distribute the provision. A servant leader doesn't just identify problems. They position people to be part of the solution. And then the last example is when he restored Peter after Peter's failure of denying who Jesus was, or who Yeshua was. And this is in John chapter 21, verses 15-17. After Peter denied him 3 times, Yeshua didn't discard him. He restored him. not with shame, but with questions. Do you love me? And with each response, he gave Peter responsibility again. Feed my sheep. Feed my sheep. This is servant leadership at its highest level because he corrected without condemnation. He restored identity before assigning responsibility, and he developed a leader beyond his failures. You see, a servant leader doesn't define people by their worst moment. They develop them toward their highest potential. Let me say that one more time. A servant leader doesn't define people by their worst moment. They develop them toward their highest potential. Yeshua didn't just speak about serving, he demonstrated it. He washed the feet of those who followed him. He fed thousands when others saw inconvenience, and he restored broken leaders when others would have replaced them. This is not leadership driven by strategy. This is leadership flowing from identity. See, servant leadership must flow from identity. It has to be your identity more than just a strategy. So when we ask the question, is servant leadership modeled after Yeshua Hamashiach? Whether acknowledged or not, the blueprint is there. Because what modern leadership calls a method, Yeshua revealed as a way of being. And the real question becomes, are we learning leadership as a skill, or are we becoming it as an identity? Are we learning leadership as a skill, or are we becoming it as an identity? See, servant leadership isn't about shrinking yourself. It's about strengthening others. It's not about losing power. It's about using power responsibly. It's not about being less of a leader. It's about being more of a human. If you want to go higher, you must be willing to go lower, practicing, exercising more genuine humility. My challenge to you today is, if this episode encouraged, empowered, inspired, or impacted you, or even if it simply planted a seed of transformation, then share it with someone who's ready to lead differently. And remember, you weren't created to stay low. You weren't designed to stay average. You were built to go higher. Be blessed. Thank you again for joining us on the brand new Go Higher show. I pray you were blessed by the information, the insights, and the challenges that were all shared. For all speaking engagements, public speaking, and leadership coaching, send your requests to gfflifellc@gmail.com. That's gfflifellc@gmail.com. Also, be sure to go on over to Amazon.com and check out the books Standing Before Kings, OG Testimony, The Blue Folder, The Art of Spiritual War, and the original first edition of the OG Testimony Is Not What You Think. All 4 titles now available over on Amazon. The brand new Go Higher show is brought to you by Greater Faith and Favor Life, GFF Life LLC, where the vision is believe greater, live greater. God bless.